So I'm joined by the energy commentator, Jamie Delaghi. Jamie, thank you for joining me. What do you make of this 10-point plan? Some of them seem quite obvious, actually, but what's your view?
Yeah, I think it's quite realistic and quite achievable. We have to frame the argument so that it's acceptable to the great public, because it's one thing for the government to impose something, but if we buy into it ourselves because we believe in it, and it's a much higher rate of success. And I think what we're talking about is tapping into that enormous sympathy for Ukraine. So yeah, we're going to reduce our dependence on Russian oil, Russian gas, Russian coal, probably, but sticking with oil. But that has consequences, and the consequence, of course, is that it reduces the amount of money going to feed Putin's war machine. We all want that, but we have to then take the consequences, and the consequences are, if there's not as much oil coming into the country, then we have to reduce our consumption. And the 10-point plan is aimed at that. Some of the ideas, I think, are, well, they're all fairly sensible, but I think some of them are more achievable than others. One of the things about reducing the speed limits, we've tried it before, and we tried it because of an oil price shock. You weren't around, Anna, when we're talking about 1973 and the first oil price shock. It started because of a war. In this case, it was the Yom Kippur War. And I say you're smiling. No, you obviously weren't there.
I was about, yes. I was born in the 71, actually, but thank you.
Oh, right.
I love that reaction.
Right, well, I do remember it very clearly. But what we had was a reduction in the speed limit on our roads to 50 miles an hour. Not the 6 miles an hour that you're talking about. And that was acceptable. I do remember myself, and it's a practical thing because it came in so quickly. I was a student at Cambridge at the time, and I was used to flying backwards and forwards to Belfast because the flights were pretty cheap, because oil was pretty cheap. Then all of a sudden, we had this massive increase in the cost of oil, and it simply was unaffordable. And so I do remember hitchhiking in the snow up the A1, it wasn't a motorway then, up to Scotch Corner and over to Stranraer to get the ferry. So it had that immediate, now it doesn't sound like a huge impact, but it was so abrupt, and it did feed into people's lives. So we got through that. I think we can manage to do the things that the IEA are suggesting. One of the things that I suppose, and you mentioned it in your list there about the working from home, so many people are still doing that. Of course, the COVID restrictions are reducing, but I think people. So the difficulty with that is that I think that a lot of people are still opting for that system. The car-free Sundays, I think that sort of makes sense. One of the things that I do believe actually will work, because it's been tried elsewhere, like the reduction in the speed limit, is this alternate car use. Now, it does depend on the assumption that your number plate has at least one digit in it. It doesn't work if it doesn't have a digit in it. But and that digit has to be either an odd number or an even number. So, yeah. And let's say there are lots of numbers. It's the last number. So if it's, let's say we're talking about Monday, which is 21st.
I think the car one for me is probably the most difficult one. But most people, I think, when they see how much the fuel is at the pumps, start to reduce their speed and the way they're driving, improve, just for the sheer fact it's burning a hole in their pocket. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me. It's lovely to hear your thoughts. That's Jamie Delaghi. He's an energy commentator. But I'm also joined by the head of policy at Net Zero Watch, Harry Wilkinson. Harry, talk to me. Do you think this plan could be long-term, and is it a good one? And could it, in effect, be an effort to fight the green agenda?
Well, you made my point for me just a moment ago when you said that customers will adjust their behaviour. I think people will look at the high oil prices at the moment, and that will encourage them, maybe where it's possible for them not to drive, for them not to do that. So I think we have to trust people to be able to react in the way that they would like to, because, again, driving is going to become more expensive, but it's still something that a lot of people are going to need to do and are going to want to do. What worries me about this IEA plan is that it's very top-down, reducing speed limits and preventing people from driving on certain days. I think that's going to be enormously disruptive, particularly for people who have to travel for whatever reason, whether maybe it's visiting ill loved ones or for business purposes. So that would be a very difficult thing to implement. I think we have to trust people to actually react to the situation. And what government can do is look at the supply side, make sure that we're opening up avenues to use our own oil and gas resources. We've got a shale gas moratorium in the UK at the moment that's preventing us from using our own gas. And in terms of oil, there's oil fields like the Cambo field in the North Sea that's being held up for largely political reasons. So we've got to see some more progress on the supply front as well as restricting demand, and trust that consumers will react, as of course they will, to an increasing price.